All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Dustin Wyant. It's June 12th, 2024. We're at Park in Maine in Carlton. And Dustin, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, yeah.
The first question, we usually ask why wine. In your case, let's ask why food?
Well, it's been a lifelong journey. I grew up cooking with my mother in the kitchen, and she was from the South, so you can think about all those great dishes and country ham and things that freak people out in Oregon that they don't understand. And so that was really the genesis of it, the food part. And when I went away to college in Virginia, it was, self-cater. You lived in the dorms the first year, and then beyond that, you kind of fended for yourself. So you had to cook, and I ended up being the one that cooked for the apartment or cooked for the guys in the fraternity, all those things. And so it just kind of naturally flowed. And, although I'm not a professional chef as a profession, it's something that I love. And, I cook at home. I cook for my family. I've got 3 beautiful daughters that, sometimes they like dad's cooking, and sometimes it's, let's pull something out of the freezer. But, it's been a lifelong journey. And then my career has taken me through it. When I moved back to Oregon, I got into the wine business quickly. I opened a small wholesaler operation in Bend, Oregon, where I grew up. And my biggest client was Willamette Valley Vineyards. And I worked for Jim Bernot for about 6 years during that time. So I started with that operation. We built Bend up, and it was great. I enjoyed being in the restaurants and around the industry. The hospitality industry is fascinating. As a student in high school, I worked all the resorts outside of Bend, and so you just grew up around food and people having fun. And it's one of the industries that people are predisposed to have a good time. They're happy when they're walking in. They're usually intent on being happy when they leave, and we get to hopefully help them through that journey. And along the way, if we can help them discover something cool on the food side, or a great wine, or a new beer pairing, then that's our role. I mean, that's really our reason for being. So, I came back and started that wholesaler operation. It ended up that Jim needed more help at the winery, and so about 1.5 years into it, he said, "Hey, why don't you come over and be our director of consumer sales?" And so I packed up and moved to Salem and worked for Jim Bernot at Willamette Valley Vineyards in Turner, and did all the sales. And in those days, these are the kind of young days still of the Oregon wine industry. This is the early 90s, and it was a time where we ran around the state. In my role, I went to every festival, every event, and Jim is very entrepreneurial, and so he was really open to great ideas, and ideas that some people go, what? And we did things that were crazy looking back on it, and things like we opened a series of mall carts. And now it doesn't sound like a big deal. You see it a lot, these pop-ups, but pop-ups weren't a thing in 1993. And so we did these pop-ups in the malls. We did 7 malls in Oregon. And so I ran around with a van and hired a person, and we went to the mall during the holidays and gave out free samples of wine. And so we had to get all of these, back then, the special event permits, you had to daisy chain them. And so I had to put in all of these permits every week and then run around in the malls. And so we sold about $400,000 worth of wine in 5 weeks from basically Thanksgiving until Christmas. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is a really interesting way to sell wine. And so it hadn't really been done before, and especially to that scale. And it was really a great way for us to introduce people to the winery that was still relatively new in those days, and introduce the brand and the wines we were making, and people loved it. And so they've done similar things since then, but that program was so exhausting for everybody because it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm backing the van into the winery and running the forklift around with pallets of wine to deliver to all these different places. So it was really interesting, and meeting all the people in the wine business, because we went to every wine festival there was in the state, plus a few in Washington. So meeting all the industry people through that period of time, it was really intense. It was intense for them, it was intense for us. We didn't know if it was gonna, is this a thing that's gonna work? Is it gonna grow? And it was just fascinating, people like Trudy Kramer and these vanguards of the industry that were out doing their own events, right? It wasn't a fleet of salespeople then. It was the people who were boots on the ground, making wine, opening their tasting room every morning, and then running around the festivals on the weekends. And so it was just really, really fun. And the people are so great in this business that, they're so free with their knowledge. At the winery, their winemaker then was Dean Cox, and Dean was out of Napa, and he was a really great winemaker. And he saw that I was there as much as he was. So when everyone had left the winery, it was Dean and I in the winery. I'm trying to figure out the next festival event, because we went to things like the gift show in the Memorial Coliseum, and we went to the boat show, and people are like, why are you here as a winery? Because nobody else is. And people want wine, or they want, when they're walking around these things, and some people want to be at those shows, and some people, they're there because a spouse wants to go. And so they find the wine court, and they're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. And so we sold a ton of wine during those days at events that weren't necessarily wine-centric, but it was a great way to expose people to Oregon wine in those early days. And it was a fun way to help the winery make more money and figure out a new avenue. So that was my introduction. We moved on. We actually started microbreweries. Northwestern Portland was our first microbrewery. It was very successful. From there, we started a brewery in California, a brewery in Colorado, a brewery in Seattle, and a brewery in New York. And so I ended up being asked to leave the wine side and to go build the brewery in Seattle. So I built a brewery. It was called Aviator Ales. It was a great brewery. It was in Woodinville, Washington, and we were one of the top 3 breweries in the market then, which was, you think about Red Hook and Pyramid and Thomas Kemper and these great Maritime Pacific, these great Washington brands that kind of lifted the craft brewing way back in the day. We were part of that, and it was a fun time. It was fun to build a brewery. I was very young then, and it was a massive learning experience. But again, the industry kind of wrapped their arms around us. I met wonderful people like the mayor of Woodinville, Lucy DeYoung. Lucy, for whatever reason, took me under her wing, and I think she felt sorry for me because it was kind of a wild time, and we were growing fast, and there was things going every which way, and it was hard to decipher when you don't have a depth of experience, which I didn't at that point in life. But there were people all along my career, whether it was Dean Cox or Lucy DeYoung or people that just cared, Jim Burnett, that taught me a lot, gave me the passion, ignited that interest in wine, and also gave me kind of insight into how all the rest of it works, the business side of it, the relationship side of it. How do we do this? I went to every city council meeting in the city of Woodinville for a year and a half, just so that people knew I was going to be there. I wasn't going to go away. I'm part of the community. And so, it was a fantastic time. During that time, we sponsored things like the Blue Angels flying in for the air show, and it was super fun. And the beer business is fun, just like the wine business is. We built a great organization, and then they ended up flying me around to help build other organizations. That's kind of my skill set. As an operator, I'm fine, I'm passable, but I really enjoy the creative part and helping people solve problems when there's problems and figure out the solutions. I credit that to a lot of these people. I mean, Lucy DeYoung put me in touch with the woman who owns all the small town newspapers in the northern part of Lake Union and Bothell and Woodinville and Redmond. And of course, those towns are now really large, thanks to a small company called Microsoft, among others. But in those days, again, it was still fairly fledgling, and they just helped me grow and helped me create a successful business. That came to an end, unfortunately. All the businesses ended up closing. We had a deal, we thought, with this brewery out of India, the UB Group. They're ginormous, run by a billionaire, owned by a billionaire, and then it all crashed down at the end. And so I left for Montana. I bought into a resort in Montana called St. Mary Lodge, the resort at Glacier. And at that point, they were looking for someone with my skill set. They wanted to grow. It was a family-owned business, which I really enjoyed. Roscoe Black, who became a dear friend and mentor, was the owner an operator. His father started it in 1932, and it was basically on the east entrance of Glacier Park. So you go over the Going to the Sun Highway, which is probably one of the most beautiful 50 miles of road on the planet. I mean, it's just breathtaking. And you end up in St. Mary, Montana on the east side. And it's this high desert, almost like Central Oregon, and then these stark, beautiful mountains. And so at that place, when I joined, we had about 55 rooms. We had 3 restaurants, we had 4 retail shops. And I stayed there for 11 years, and we ended up with 154 rooms, 6 restaurants, 7 retail stores, a gas station, a laundromat, a market. We operated our own water and sewer treatment plant. I mean, it was basically running a small city. And it was really intense because our season was so short. It basically went from May until October 1st, or whenever the park opened, which sometimes was June with all the snowpack. And so we just brought people from all over the world, literally, to work with us. 250 associates that lived on property, worked on property. We fed them all 3 meals a day. And so if you can imagine that environment, and this is pre-internet really being readily available everywhere, let alone in the middle of nowhere. And we were the middle of nowhere. We were about 13 miles in the Canadian border. The only TV we got was via satellite. The only internet we got was via satellite. And so you can imagine the squelch that you when you booted up your computer, and we had 2 internet terminals for all these 250 people to share and communicate with their families and friends all over the world. We had 2 TVs at the property when we started. And so you think all we had to do was deal with each other. And so it was a really interesting environment because of that intensity when you don't have the distraction of life, when you don't have social media, you don't have TV, you don't have your phone. Literally, there was no smartphone back then. I remember buying an iPod and thinking that was the coolest thing ever, that all of my library of CDs was on this little iPod. And so you think about that, it shows how old I am. But it was a fascinating time because then you had to relate to, you had to be friends with people, you had to make friends, you had to, if you were shy, you couldn't hide. I mean, there was no place to hide. If you had idiosyncrasies, we all knew, everybody knew. So it was no big deal. We all have them, right? We're all weird in ways. And so that environment taught me to really focus, 120-day season. By the end, after we did all the improvements, we did about $9 million a year in 120 days. So you can think about that intensity, that level of volume, and all the different restaurants. And that's where I met many, many great chefs. Brian Matola stands out in my mind. Brian was this great Italian from New York City and was an incredible chef, was the chef at the Ritz-Carlton Palm Beach Hotel. And we hired him out of that. He wanted to change the scenery. He wanted something different for his family at that point. He had 2 young children, 2 boys. And so Brian moved to Montana and was our chef for about 6 years at the resort. And that's the other thing we tried to create, was this continuity of people, because before I got there, it was always a new management team. So you think about a seasonal resort, it's almost like opening a new place every year. And when you have 6 restaurants on property, you're opening 6 new restaurants every year. And so, getting some of these people in that worked with us for a long time. Norm Felton was our food and beverage director for many years during that time. And Norm was a great guy out of Seattle. Brian's energy and his commitment to doing things and trying to figure out the matrix of, okay, we have access to elk and bison and all of these fun raw materials to make really great food. We had a 250-seat dining room, and the challenge was, how do we do this with 10 kids from the Big Ten schools and 12 kids from Pac-10 schools and 8 kids from the SEC and a bunch of independent people, but they all had one thing in common. None of them had ever cooked before. And so we had a team with those 6 restaurants. We had 6 professional culinarians. We had a full-time pastry chef, and we had seasonal management that ran the operations. But it was intense to figure out, okay, we're doing elk carpaccio. How are we going to explain this, teach this to someone so they can do it and make it look beautiful on a plate? Or we're going to do bison tenderloin, or we're going to do elk medallions, or we're going to do all of these great things. We bought fish from the Blackfeet tribe out of St. Mary Lake, and filleting hundreds of fish a day to make whitefish. And so it was a fascinating time in life. I learned so much. It was like a gigantic brain dump, but it was because of all of these really cool people in my career that really opened themselves up. Brian could have been the chef. I was the general manager, and he could have thought, oh, why is the GM always looking over my shoulder? And, why does he want to be around so much? And some people might take that as, hey, this is my realm, leave me alone. And finally, I told Brian, I said, my only role here is to help you. And frankly, I just want to learn from you so I know how to do it. Because even there, with all those restaurants, we made our own demi, right? So you're talking about he's bringing in all these veal bones and roasting them in the oven. And then we had this giant growing kettle that we're cooking down and making stock. And then, it was fascinating to learn from these people who are epically talented, more talented than I can ever dream to be. But picking up all those nuggets just impassioned me more. There were years where we had things that really happened that were out of the ordinary. You think about being in Montana, people are climbing mountains. We had tragic things happen. We had euphoric things happen. I know of at least 20 people in the course of my 12 years that met at our resort and got married and now have families. So it was really, really awesome. And then that came to an end. Roscoe, had 6 siblings. It's difficult. Family businesses are difficult anyway, but when you have a lot of people and we really rose quickly. We built a lot of things fast. The resort grew quickly from about a $3 or $4 million business to a $9 million business. And so his family really thought they were going to get rich, and they sold it. And so we were all out. And so I spent a year in Montana, literally liquidating all of our assets and saying goodbye to Montana. And I moved back to Oregon, and I called some of the contacts that I had in the wine business, the Kramers and Jim and different people, and said, I'm coming back. I want to build hotels and restaurants in the wine country because I've watched it grow. And I watched, even from Montana, I'm trying to order Oregon Pinot Noir in Montana, and it was like pulling teeth with my distributor in the Flathead Valley then. Now you can get whatever you want there, of course, but then it was like, Oregon what? Why don't we just serve this California wine or whatever? So, coming back, I loved Oregon. I loved the wine industry. As much as Central Oregon and Bend were enticing, I really felt that the opportunity to build something, to build a family, was in the wine country. And so I searched around, and I put out feelers. I ended up getting paired up with the Bergstroms, which was fantastic. Josh is a brilliant winemaker. Sister Kendall had these development ideas, and so they had built this building in Dundee that was going to be an office building. And it wasn't working. People didn't want their offices in Dundee because the traffic, was so bad. And so I was approached, and they said, well, we know you're looking to build hotels and restaurants. Would you consider putting a hotel and restaurant in these buildings? And I said, well, sure. I said, I'll do it, but I don't necessarily, I don't have the cash to put it in, and I don't really, they're not my buildings. And so if you will fund most of the tenant improvements, and so we put in what was then called Farm to Fork and the Inn at Red Hills. And inside Farm to Fork was Press, which was a wine bar and a wine retail shop. And so we opened it up. It was a fantastic experience. The restaurant was successful almost instantly, and people really liked it. I met Paul Bichond, and Paul became my partner later on, but I hired Paul to be our first chef there. We created a lot of great food, and again, we dove deep and made a lot of friends in the wine community because of Farm to Fork and because of the Inn at Red Hills, and the circle expanded, and now we're all in Souls and the Lang family and all these awesome pioneers of Oregon wine, and Dick Erath, and I felt like I was walking among movie stars. You're kind of shell-shocked a little bit because all of these people they're famous. Especially if you're into wine, and to meet them and to then become friends with them. And Roland and I started the Dundee Civic Association to kind of try and galvanize the people who were in Dundee to do things even with the traffic on the road. And and things like that. And not a lot of people really wanted the wine thing at that point in time. And so we tried to put on events and organize people to do collaborative events. And I remember one time Roland had this friend, and he was the sound director for the Olympics in Los Angeles when they happened in '94. And he was like, let's put on a big adult prom, and I'll have my friend bring all of his sound equipment and set it up. And so we did at Argyle Winery, and we put up all the things and the disco ball, and everyone dressed up like it was 1975, and it was awesome. But we did fun things. It was a heady time. Everybody was growing fast. There was a lot of change starting to happen. And, in that period of time, Oregon wine went from this heavy lifting of all these pioneers, David Adelsheim and all these people, to now people moving in, right? And people from France and people from California, and more people coming back to Oregon who saw this growing, and maybe they went down to Davis and got an education in viticulture or winemaking, and then we're coming back to Oregon after apprenticing all over the world. And so there was a lot of change starting to happen really fast at that point, and it was great to be a part of it. I left that operation. It was, they wanted to go a different direction. We were kind of folksy and approachable. We had a big deli case with charcuterie, and Paul would make beautiful, beautiful things and put it in the case. And they wanted to be more upscale, and so they turned it into Paul A. at that point, the ownership group. And at that point, it was almost like it was supposed to happen. But I left, and I was looking to still find this property. Kendall and I were trying to find a space. We actually looked at this property right outside of Carlton, and that got me into Carlton deeper. And I thought, man, Carlton is so awesome. And so I ended up buying a house here in Carlton and moving out here and trying to start something. And we never did build anything at Foothills Farm, which is now surrounded by Resonance, the Louis Jadot operation. That was owned by Kevin Chambers, who I worked with at Willamette Valley Vineyards. Kevin was a wine writer. Kevin was a retailer of wine. And Kevin was the national sales director when I was the direct-to-consumer director for Jim Burnett. And then we both simultaneously went into the beer side as we grew all these breweries. And Kevin became the one who did the road shows for the stock offerings in all the cities, and I became the ops guy. And so Kevin and I had so many experiences, and his depth of knowledge, he planted Resonance and was biodynamic way back. And they kept the name. I mean, that's how intense that Jadot felt about that property, that they kept the name Resonance. And he is like an encyclopedia of wine, his knowledge, his palate. And so being able to spend about 4 or 5 years with Kevin really, again, helped further shape, who I wanted to be in the wine. Press, the wine bar, was a great place where we featured Oregon wines and tasted. And then when Paul eventually left as well, and we started Recipe in Newberg, Oregon. And Recipe was this really great old Victorian house, and Paul and I slaved away at that place and sanded floors, and I built the bar. We put in lights, we built banquettes, we recovered furniture. We bought these old chairs and stripped them down, sanded all of them. I mean, Paul would probably kill me by all the sanding we did. There was dust and everything, but we built that place literally, the two of us, by hand. We didn't have a contractor. We had electrical people to do electrical when needed, and we had plumbing people because we needed them. We didn't have those skills. But we built Recipe. It became really this mixing pot for the wine community. It was so much fun to sit at the bar, and I was kind of the maitre d' and bartender, and we had our servers, and on any given night at the bar might be Patty Green, Mike Edsel, Doug Tennell, coming in, just sitting down, having dinner. It was just kind of a constant flow of these great people in wine. And again, it was really heady because we thought of ourselves as this little restaurant that could, right? And to be around all these people that are so skilled and famous, and when people recognize them, it was almost like an autograph study. I mean, people wouldn't ask for the autograph, but it was like, oh my gosh, is that Eugenia Key and David? I was like, yeah, it is. And so those days were so much fun. We worked our tails off at Recipe. super fond memories of learning from Paul on the culinary side. Fantastic chef, fantastic palate, one of the best palates I've been around. He loves French wine. And so we went deep into French wines at Recipe, and that was fascinating to me because I had almost no knowledge of French wine at that point. I was very Oregon-centric. That was my really only resource growing up in the hospitality industry was Oregon. And so, yeah, we grew that business. We had a fire at one point. In the middle of it, we started Recipe because I actually had a project on the burner with Bob Emmerich out of McMinnville, and we were going to build this wine tasting area and restaurant, things like that. We were going to buy the old J.C. Penney building and put it in there, and it just fell apart. And so that's how Recipe got started. Was I was out of work and needed to work, and so we started Recipe. And then in the middle, about 6 years into Recipe, I left and went to McMinnville and started the Barberry and the 1882 Grill at that point. The Barberry no longer exists, but it was kind of the fine dining steakhouse style restaurant, massive wine list. In fact, we won 3 Wine Spectator awards during that time period at the Barberry. Again, it was even deeper dive into what was now this exploding Oregon wine scene. Because at that point, you've got all the people coming in from out of state. You've got people who may be wealthy from another career, orthopedic surgeon, sales reps, whatever, coming to Oregon, starting small wineries. And then you had this great element of bootstrappers who worked for Domaine Dren or worked for one of the wineries like Brick House, and now they were branching out on their own, or worked for Argyle, and they're starting their own brands, right? And it's literally like one person, and they're making wine during the day for a larger company, and then all the rest of their time is spent making their own wine and trying to start their own brands. And so that was super fun. I remember Grant Coulter starting 100 Sons, and we love Grant and his wife Renee. They're beautiful people. They make beautiful wines. They do it by passion. And I remember it was their first year. I think they produced like 600 cases of wine that year. And I was so excited about it that I bought as much as I could. And in those days, there wasn't like allocation. They were just happy to sell it. And so that first year, we sold 60 cases of his 600 case production of 100 Sons. And so, just that element of, wow, we're helping. We're a part of it. We're helping these people. They're awesome people. They deserve it. And it became kind of a mantra to a certain extent, like, obviously I was shaped to love Oregon wine and promote it and want to be out there. But then it took another level of, okay, let's not just say yes when these operators come with, hey, I made this, but let's maybe go seek it. Let's ask, hey, who else is making good stuff that nobody knows about yet? And so we built this cool wine program at the Barberry and did tastings and really it was mutually beneficial. We had a secret, this great Oregon wine that's half the price of these other name wines, but just as good, maybe better, and come and taste it here. We're one of the few places that have it. And so we built that out, and it was an unreal journey. There were a lot of people involved in it that really expanded the place. We went deep into whiskey in the bar of that area, so we got into whiskeys and had one of the best whiskey selections in Oregon in those days, and that was super fun. And then, lo and behold, this place here that we're sitting in, Park and Main, which back then was the Horseradish. The Horseradish found a new spot that had a full kitchen. The Horseradish in those days was charcuterie boards and cheese and maybe a sandwich and soup, and that was about it. And they found a full kitchen, so they wanted to move. And so this space came open, and oddly enough, my wife and I had our engagement party with Sabra way back in the day, Sabra Matteau, who started the Horseradish. And we had our engagement party here, and when the space came open, I'm like, honey, we've got to go. I'm not getting any younger. We have this young family. We need to get something started so that at some point I won't be a slave to this business, but I'll be able to enjoy our daughters and their sports or their music or whatever it is they choose to go into. And so I left the Barberry and started what has become Park and Main. It's the two streets that we've lived on in Carlton. So I first moved here, we lived on Main Street, right next to the Baptist church. And then when we started having a family, when my first daughter was born, we're like, we got to get off Main Street. It's too busy. It's too dangerous for children. And so we bought a house at the very end of Park Street, butts up to Westerlook Farm. We're surrounded by a farm. It's because we're at the end of town. And so it's like having a farm without having to take care of it, which is really great. And so we lived on Park, we lived on Main. We're at the intersection of Park and Main here in Carlton. And I've always dreamt of having a place. In fact, I moved to Carlton thinking I'm going to put something in Carlton. I'm going to open a restaurant or build a hotel or something. And just the timing was always like a year off. Like something would come open. Like at one point, Jobert across the street retired. They sold the building. And I thought, oh, that's it. But we just started Recipe. And then another point, another building came open and we just started Barberry. And so it was just not on the right wave. And so when this came open at that moment, which was 2019, I said, I'm not going to wait for timing anymore. This is the right spot. We need to go. We need to build something. And so we set out to build a living room for the community because there's a lot of great restaurants in town. There's a lot of great bars. Back then there was a different makeup, but there wasn't really a place then that was very family friendly or a place where you could just go hang out, right? Most of it was formatted so you were in the restaurant or you were in the bar, but there wasn't like a place that you could hang out, meet friends. Those friends would leave, new friends would join, it would just kind of keep rolling. And so we created Park and Main with elements of all of that background. The Montana background where we had 6 different restaurant concepts, 7 different retail concepts. So we kind of shrunk it all down. We had a great pizza place in Montana. We had an ice cream shop where we made our own ice cream. And so I dug into all of that knowledge to start Park and Main. We started From Another Udder, which is our ice cream shop. We make our own ice cream 100% by hand, half of which is boozy, which is fun. So you can come in and get a pina colada ice cream, and it's got rum in it. And you can come in and get bourbon butter pecan, and it's got Bull Run's bourbon from across the street. And we do classic cocktail ice creams, and we do things that we invent in our own head, like we made licorice, where we actually took Danish licorice and we macerated it in ouzo, and then spun it all up, and then added a bottle of ouzo to the batch, and it's licorice. So it's just one of those fun things. The wood-fired oven that we bought out of California, the insides are from Italy, the authentic fire brick. We introduced that, and the market. So there's obviously grocery store in Carlton, small one, but there's no place to get gourmet goods. There's no place to buy wine. And so we thought we need a wine shop in our town. We need a place that people can buy great jams or salts or cheese or charcuterie or whatever it might be. And so we conceived this place that's a market, that's a restaurant, that's a wine shop. It's all of those things. And then we were about to open, and COVID happened. So I literally spent 8 months of my life building this place by hand. My father-in-law, Del Nyman, who's passed now, literally helped me build every wall in here, helped me build the banquettes and the booths. We had a gentleman, John, who built all of our case goods for the wine, because that had to be nicer than I could execute. But all the rest of it I built. I built the bar myself. And we built this out. We had to bring the oven in through the front windows because it was so big, and then build the walls around it. So that's what my father-in-law and I did. And then when COVID happened, we were about probably 4 weeks from opening. And Mary Frances called me, my wife, and said, we can't open. The governor just shut down the state. And I was like, oh man, you've got to be kidding me. I was saying worse things than that, as you might imagine, because I just sunk everything I had into building out this space. And now the concept of not being able to open it and actually start selling things to make that money back was very real and terrifying. And so we started selling pizzas out the front door. I called the point of sale company. I said, stop everything I told you about retail and all these other things. Forget everything I said. Forget all the work we've done. I just need to be able to have an online presence and be able to sell online that people can easily access and find us. And we'll figure the rest out later. And so we opened April 27th with takeout only. The laws in the state of Oregon at that point in Yamhill County where you could only do takeout. Nobody could be in the building. So we literally had plastic on the windows. Nobody could come in the building. We had a table at the door. We'd get takeout orders. I would cook. My wife would run the register and run the door and answer the phones. And it was 2 of us for 2 weeks. And then the next week, people started figuring out we were open. And one Friday night, we did 94 pizzas. And I told my wife, I said, we need to hire some people. And so we did. We hired a dishwasher, a young man, and started hiring a team because when COVID happened, we just said, okay, well, we can't hire people if we don't want to say, hey, you have a job, and then not be able to pay them. And so we were in this weird place that I'd never been in an opening. I'd opened a lot of restaurants. And we've always had open houses, and we've always invited the community and the wine community and friends and family. And here we are, we can't even open the doors. We can't even have people in the building. And so we were looking for a chef, we stopped. We were looking for managers, we stopped. And so because of that, it became me being the chef. It became my wife being the manager. She'd never worked in a restaurant in her life. Like, she's HR. Worked in an investment bank in downtown Portland as an HR director. And so we were spinning for 2 years really, because COVID lasted, and then we had points in that year where we could have people in, only 50% in. We had Dine Outside, Ken Wright, who we've become good friends with and owned this building at the time, was like, I have a tent, because in the fall, I don't know if you remember, they had this lockdown and it was only outside dining. So he put a tent up, his crew did for us. It's still up right now. And so we had people out there in November and December and January. It's 36 degrees and the rain's blowing sideways, and they're out here supporting us. The city of Carlton, this community saved us, literally saved us as a community. The wine community, the people who live in this town kept us from folding before we even got it open, to be honest. And it was, again, one of those mutually beneficial things. People would show up. A lady gave us a $1,500 check. She's like, just keep it. It was crazy, crazy time. But we made it, and it was awesome. This town we love so much. I mean, it's so cool to be here. So Park and Main's been great. We've got a team. We hire these really cool people, and they do awesome stuff. Chuck Thomas is our beverage director. He's like an encyclopedia of wine and beer. He's got connections in the beer business that are, we get beer that nobody else even knows exists. Some of the products out of Fort George Brewing and things that people come to us with. Nathan Etzel started a brewery out here, hyper small. We're the only people that have his beer for weeks. And so we give something that's good. We buy from the farms. So back to the recipe days, you think we're buying from these local farms, and it was so, the farm to table thing was going, but it was fledgling. And so here these farmers show up in their Subaru and open the hatch and got a couple totes, and we put it on the porch and laid out the vegetables, and now we've got multiple farms out here to buy from, and we still are farm to table at Park and Main. We believe in it. It just tastes better. Honestly, it's a better product. It's picked when it's ready versus being picked when it's not ready. And so we've continued that philosophy here of being farm to table. We continue to support the Oregon wine business. We have a lot of fun import wines here. So, we do pizza, so we have a lot of Italian, which is really fun actually for the wine community. And what I've also learned is that when you make Pinot Noir and Chardonnay all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and you're a winemaker, when you go out, you don't necessarily want to drink Pinot Noir because you've been drinking, And so they're looking for these great wines, wines from Italy, wines from Portugal, wines from Spain, wines from France that they can enjoy and just sit down and kind of turn off for a minute, right? We're all, in the hospitality business, you're almost always on. But it's good for them. They enjoy the rotating selections. They enjoy the depth. The wine shop here, we sell more wine as a wine shop because everything's retail priced. And so if you come into the restaurant, it's kind of a cool thing, because if you really know the price of these bottles in a restaurant, we have some bottles that might be $200 in a restaurant and they're under $100 here. And so that, when people know, they're like pulling bottles. And I was telling my staff at the very start, when we actually started to have people in, I was trying to explain to them the phenomenon. We're a counter service restaurant, right? And I'm saying, you're gonna watch someone order a $13 pizza and then buy a $150 bottle of wine. And they looked at me like I was from outer space. Like, that is not gonna happen, Dustin. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and it happens all the time. Because they still wanna drink good wine. You know, the people who work in the tasting rooms and work in the cellars and the production love to come here and enjoy these great wines at a retail price and not have to pay restaurant price, but have a restaurant experience. So that's been really fun and fascinating. And again, we started because of COVID, we still couldn't hire. Couldn't find the chef, we couldn't find, you know, the positions, and now we're at a point where we found a great chef, Philip Michael Price, who is our executive chef. We're about to open a new restaurant concept next door called Ikigai, which is an Asian restaurant, sushi and ramen and dan noodles and lots of local fresh vegetables and produce as well on that menu. And so it's something that a lot of people are excited about. You know, the ice cream has taken off. We've hired a woman who's passionate about ice cream. She makes all of our ice cream now, Marion. We go to the farmer's market in McMinnville on Thursdays. We're trying to find another truck so we can go to other markets. So it's really exploded in a great way. It's been super crazy. And you know, there are times, I remember in November of 20, we all got COVID. And so we closed the restaurant for 3 weeks. And that was like, oh my gosh, you know, what's gonna happen? We'll be able to make it. We didn't get any loans, you know, they had the PPE and whatever it was. And because we hadn't been open, we had no history to show that we were being damaged. And so the applications were just rejected. Grant applications, applications for loans, any of the stuff just got rejected. And so I told Mary Frances, I said, buckle up, honey, we're in it on our own. We've got to do it ourselves. And again, the community supported the heck out of us. They've grown this business. They've allowed us to expand next door. The ice cream was actually where the deli case is now. And there was a jam shop next door. And the lady who owned the jam shop moved to Idaho. And we're like, well, take the space. And so we moved all of our ice cream production in there and started a candy shop along with it. So now we make ice cream and fudge and have old-fashioned candy and gourmet candy made from all over Oregon that we bring in and put on the shelf for people to enjoy. The pint phenomenon on ice cream has been crazy. When we started, because we couldn't sell scoops, I thought, I just opened an ice cream shop and we can't sell a scoop. What am I gonna do? And so we sold pints to go. And I thought that would go away when people were able to get scoops, and it hasn't. So now we've expanded. We have ice cream sandwiches and our version of a Choco Taco. And there's, you know, you think of old-fashioned flavors like cookies and cream and salted caramel. We have that, but we also have bourbon butter pecan and all those boozy flavors. And we have seasonal items all the time in ice cream. So as we're getting now into berry season, now you see strawberry margarita and strawberry ice cream. And so it's just a really fun place to be. You know, we give a shifty, which is a scoop of ice cream at the end of people's shift here, which is kind of fun. And we have short fills, you know, just like you do in the beer and wine business, you know, at the start and the end when you're calibrating equipment or whatever, you have short fills. And so we give those away to the staff. We call them X pints. The pint has an X on it. But yeah, the journey's been incredible. The knowledge that we have and the passion that we have around us has been incredible. The people give us gifts every day like that with their knowledge and their time. And I think to myself, when I see these friends now that come in and dine, and it's these icons of Oregon wine and Oregon beer, and now Oregon distilling, because that's now really exploded. And to have them here at Park and Main is so much fun. And on a Friday night here, you know, it's like the town is here, and people come in, and some people leave, and other people join. Another bottle of wine is open, and they order more cheesy bread, or they order the special, or they order some oysters, and it just kind of rolls. And Friday night is like, you know, it was the dream. It was what was in our head. We've created the living room for this community. We love this community. The community loves us back like crazy and has helped us survive the kerfuffle of the COVID times and flourish now that it's over, and we're able to find these great, talented people who share our passion. That's how we came up with the name for the restaurant next door, Ikigai. It's actually a Japanese term, concept. And a short synopsis of it really means your purpose in life. And for Mary Frances and I, our purpose in life is to create really cool food and beverage experiences that people enjoy, and that helps create community. I haven't really been around anything else, maybe athletics, that creates community, like sitting down and eating and drinking with people. And whether it's people that you're already friends with or family, or it's people that you just met because you came in and all the seats were full and you had to sit with them, it creates a community. We have families come in and their kids know, okay, mom and dad are out with their friends in the back and eating, and we're done. We're going over to the ice cream shop, and they just come in and say, hey, I'm Caitlin Sticka's daughter. Well, put it on their tab, and it's that kind of thing. We have this great group of friends and who have kids, and to see that flourish here, and to see the dream of building a living room and sharing great local products, whether it's Oregon wine or it's fava beans or anything like that, is really enriching for us. We hope people love it, and we want people to forever think of it a place that maybe 10 years from now or whatever, and these kids that were coming in buying ice cream are going to bring their families in and be like, this is where I went and got candy and ice cream. We sat out back and kicked the soccer ball after practice and had pizza and enjoyed it. And so now with Ikigai, it's a little bit different experience. We're a very casual and open place. We don't take reservations here. It's counter service. And Ikigai is going to be a fun, traditional restaurant service. We have a really cool speakeasy bar in the back that has an alley access. And we've tried to use the components of another old building in Carlton and use them to the best of our ability. Done a lot of renovations and trying to keep it so that people can see it's our heart going through the restaurant. The decor is not traditional of an Asian restaurant. It's traditional of what we do. There's like farm implements all over the walls, and there's dried botanical arrangements, and there's this really fun lighting and this slat wall that really makes you feel like you could be somewhere else. And this whole yin and yang of that space is really, really energizing. The food's going to be really incredible, and again, just like here, all from scratch. So right now we're in startup, and we're starting to make stock and broth. We've fermented for kimchi. We've fermented for sauces. Philip is making ponzu. All of our sauces are made in house. The other nice thing is that other than the ramen, for the most part, we're using a tamari based for soy, so it's almost all gluten free. So you think about that in this paradigm of today's world. We're gonna have a lot of vegetable offerings because of the local rotating produce, and so he's creating things that are just going to be incredible on that side of things. And then of course sushi, and who doesn't like sushi? So we have a gentleman. The funny thing about this is that I think there's an energy in the world, a cosmic energy that attracts people. We have a gentleman who came to us a couple of years ago. He's made pizzas for 2 years now here. He has 15 years of sushi experience. And so one day when I told him, like, this building came open next to us, we're leasing it, we're going to start an Asian restaurant with sushi, he was like over the moon. So sometimes I guess, you can plan and plan and plan, and sometimes the world takes over the planning for you and helps you along, and all of these people help you along, and you sort it out together. So, that's one thing that we have learned in this weird period of COVID and social media and whatever it is, that you just have to be open, kind of listen to the heartbeat of the planet and the heartbeat of what's around you, and pay attention to it, because you have these moments sometime. I've had moments all in my career that I'm so thankful for. I think, man, that was so cool, and and I can't believe I worked with that person, and I can't believe we did these things, and it afforded me the ability to travel the world. And when you're in Montana for 6 months and you work 115 hours a week, that gives you some time in the winter that you don't have to work. And so I got to backpack Chile, New Zealand, Europe, take 5 weeks off in the winter and go explore. I hitchhiked those countries, and so like in New Zealand, I bought a ferry ticket, but other than that, I hitchhiked the entire country for 5 weeks and explored their wine country and slept on the ground and, was a vagabond. And so those things, the wine industry has afforded me that. The hospitality industry has afforded me that. There's some sacrifices that get made. You work long hours, you work hard, but I love it. And it's in my blood. You have a hospitality heart or you don't, I always say. And we want people who get energized by it and get energy back. Our customers are like nuclear power plants for me. They just feed energy back, and it's so great to have them go, oh, this is so good. This new thing that Philip made is so good, or whatever, and appreciate the fact that we're buying the right stuff and serving it the proper way. And I think that is what keeps us going. That when we have the challenges and we think, oh no, we didn't pass that inspection, or we didn't get that permit on time, or we didn't, the contractor's now busy with this. They're just hurdles, and if you have the right folks around you, you can overcome all of it. Fortunately, we have lots of great wine around us too that helps us overcome all of it. But next door, we're really excited. A new thing for me, kind of another step. We're having a great sake list, and so that's a learning adventure for all of us, because we're not, we didn't grow up drinking sake, didn't have that as part of the mealtime. May have had wine, may have had beer, may have had cocktails, but it's a new realm. We're getting educated by our wholesalers, who are fantastic, passionate. We have a master who's a wholesaler rep, who has been a wealth of knowledge for us and freely gives knowledge. So again, finding just out of chance those people who have same passions that we do to provide something that's unique. We're going to serve sake like we do wine and present it in a nice glass, and so you can get the aromatics and you can get the nuances of all these different sakes. I had no idea there was such a breadth of sake available, and the polishing of the rice and the aging techniques and the water. Just like beer, the water is so critical and important to that process. It's a brewing process. So yeah, all of these things we've loved. The friendships have lasted. They've grown. There's more. And now we start to see this next phase of the Oregon wine business, which is really exploding. So you went through, the pioneers, then you went through these wealthy individuals buying wineries, and then the bootstrappers came in, and then you had California and France coming in. And now you have these giant multinational conglomerates coming in, huge, old organizations that have lots of money, lots of depth in wine, and they're buying swaths of land and putting in vineyard, managing vineyards, and bringing their knowledge and their talent pool and their ability to attract. They attract not just other wine people, but they attract food people. You see the awards, the James Beard Awards, the restaurants in McMinnville were nominated for. Is so awesome, and I cheer those people for what their commitment, and I cheer them also for we need that. If this area is going to keep growing, we need that. We need that recognition. We need passionate people to do those things and execute it and build that the next step. This area, Carlton, the city, when I came into it, I thought, wow, this is Healdsburg 30 years ago, to give a reference. And, I don't know that it'll ever be exactly that. It's still going to be Carlton. But we're in that direction. I think it's an awesome place. It's an awesome place to raise my family. The girls can go and say, all right, go down the park, go get a thing at the market or meet your friends or whatever, and we don't have to worry about it. And it's one of those things that you can be as involved as you want. I mean, all these organizations are fledgling. We had a business associating meeting last night, and we just got a amount of money from the city to finally do an update to the web pages, an update to the social media, revamp it all, and start to promote Carlton, because we don't have a marketing arm. We don't have a true chamber. We don't have, it's just volunteers It's people who own restaurants, people who own shops, people who are in insurance, volunteering to try and make the town better. And so that's galvanizing and fun and scary and all the things. So as we launch this new adventure, we just hope people will enjoy it. We think it's something that is underserved out here, the style of food that we're going to do, that it's hard to find. There's few and far between, and so we hope we bring something different to the community, and we hope they love it. I think they will. It's going to be a really neat place. The food's going to be proper and delicious. The offerings for Oregon wine and international wine and sake and craft beer are going to be incredible. And the space itself is really going to be inviting, I think. When people see the dining room and the feel it has and the vibe it gives, and then the bar, which has its own kind of orbit, I think it'll be a great place to hang out and enjoy. And we hope that Carlton keeps growing in a great way. I mean, there's Oregon land use laws. I mean, I tried to build a hotel out on farmland, and I threw away a lot of money doing that. That was pretty stupid in hindsight, but we tried. We actually wrote legislation and tried to get it done and tried to do this whole holistic, off the grid, wine and food experience, see the sheep, that we made cheese, all those things, but it was just too hard then. And would take too long, but we're still a part of what is this ever-evolving culture of food and ever-evolving culture of wine, and all of this new energy and influx of resource, whether it's capital or it's experience or it's intelligence, is awesome to be around. I feel fortunate and I feel small in a certain way, because it's, you're surrounded by all this talent, and it's not just famous now from an Oregon standpoint, but it's internationally famous. And some of our winemakers are getting international recognitions and national recognitions. And it's just an incredible time to be surfing this wave in Oregon and in a place like Carlton, which is, probably the most undiscovered, coolest city in the state of Oregon. You walk down Main Street, it's beautiful, it's cool, it's surrounded by these vineyards and these farms and the hazelnut orchards and we pinch ourselves every day and go, I can't believe we're living here. Why would you want to move and live in Tuscany when you have this? So we're pretty lucky, and we're pretty thankful for it. And we just want people to come here and enjoy it, and hopefully get turned on like we did and be like, wow, that would be a cool place. I'm an artist. Maybe I can put my pottery shop, or maybe, all those kind of things that we need to keep growing. The Valley needs to keep growing. We hope people discover it and bring their energy and talent and join us in all of it, because it's really an exceptional place. I can't think of a place that I'd rather live right now. I can't think of a place. My daughters are 12 and 10 and 7, and they love it. They love playing soccer with Karen Wright, and they love going to the track meets, and they love singing in the choirs and all that stuff. And they have an environment where we know it's a small enough town that someone will tell us, like, I saw McKenna and she was doing this, and then we say something to McKenna and she's like, how did you know that? Like, oh, we have sources everywhere, but that's part of the fun of it. In a joyous way. Small towns. I grew up in Bend when it was a small town. I love to go to Bend now with all the stuff it has, but I don't think I could ever live there again. And so, it's a cool place to visit. I lived in Washington, D.C. too. A cool place to visit. But yeah, living in Carlton and having a business here and being part of the community it's the best thing ever.
So you covered most of what I wanted to cover. I got a couple questions to kind of go back and follow up through. So I want to talk about your introduction into wine and starting to work, especially with Jim Bernot, starting to work with them. So tell me about the process for you of learning wine, of discovering wine, learning not only sort of a palate and from the educational standpoint, but also how to sell it, how to move it. What was the process like for you? What excited you about learning about wine?
Well, first of all, I enjoyed it from the start. It was interesting to get to the next level. Jim's obviously a passionate man. Dean, who is the winemaker, we would be at the winery and it would be late at night, and Dean was one of the hardest working people I've ever been around, and I would love to work. And so Dean would be like, hey, put that down, come here. And so we'd go out on the floor of the winery and there'd be barrels of Pinot Noir and he'd have a thief and a spit bucket, and he'd be like, now this is this, taste it, smell it. Now this is this, taste it, smell it. And then he'd be like, now you see how this has that earthy, complex component? This has more berry and fruit driven. This we're probably gonna take out a barrel. And then we're gonna take these two and make our reserve. And we're gonna take this one and we're gonna make it our single vineyard from Elton, or whatever it might be. And so I really went into 12 months of life where it was immersion, like not just tasting wine and understanding taste components, nuances, getting to know the different terroir of Oregon and the different, what are now AVAs, which a lot of them didn't exist back then. And knowing why Dundee Hills wines have this characteristic, and knowing why Yamhill, Carlton wines have that, and learning the soils and what's the difference between a Jory soil and a marine sedimentary soil and all of these things. It was a deep dive, and Dean was a wealth of information, and Jim was a wealth of information, and they were free with it. And they were surrounded by people who were also passionate. So learning all those things was a brave new world for me, but I loved it. And there were times where Dean would be getting ready to do a Riesling blend or start the bottle. And so he would be like, hey, Dustin, come on, we're going shopping. So he'd take pulls off of our tanks. We'd put them in bottles. We'd roll down to the Roths and buy a bunch of bottles of different Riesling, and then go to the wine shop in Salem and buy Riesling. And we'd sit down and there'd be like 20 Rieslings on a table, and we'd go through and taste Riesling. And to me, like in those days, I was like, Riesling, oh, it's a sweet white wine, whatever. And to understand the depth and, oh my gosh, this is from the Mosel, and feel that petrol and smell it, and then get these flavors that are, that's sweet and fruity, and now, that acid, and cleaning your palate, and why this is good with this food and why it's good with that food. I mean, that really took it over the top, and those people wanting to do that, not because they wanted to teach me so I could go sell more wine. They wanted to do it because they loved it and they wanted to share it. And so I spent 12 months immersed with those folks, immersed with people on the road and saying, hey, try this, try this, try this. And it was fun, first of all. And so that made it all the more enjoyable to want to dive more, read more, learn more about the soils of Oregon, the varietals, why, all the parallels with Burgundy, and going into, wow, Oregon someday is going to be the best Chardonnay on the planet. It's going to be the best sparkling wine on the planet. Has that potential, and learning those things from people who are impassioned by it, and then bouncing that against some of these great chefs like Paul and Brian and Philip, and these people I've worked with that have these palates that are so developed. And I've got to be honest, I know a lot about wine. I've consumed a lot of wine, but some of these folks with their palate are just so tremendous, and their ability to go from, I just tasted this, and to go, oh, we're going to make this pork belly, we're going to put this type of glaze, it's going to be incredible. And I'm going like, yeah, that is going to be incredible. I can't wait. And so that part of Oregon wine business is incredible. And that, that learning process for me started with 12 months of really being buried by it, and then has gone on a daily basis, because people bring their wines around. You go to people's houses and they bring wine, and they're like, this is what we're making, this is what we're doing, this is how we're growing it, this is where this, and you have all people who have different takes on things. We planted, these are all north facing. People think we're crazy, but Oregon's warming up, and and it gives it a cooler when it's hot, and you get those heat spikes that we've had in recent years. Like, it doesn't affect our vineyard. That's why we did this. And some years we don't make wine out of this section because it doesn't get right. But in those other years we are, and it's so nuanced, and has so much depth. So learning all of that from these wine people is fascinating. And their passion, like, you can't read that in a book, right? You can watch a YouTube, you can watch, documentaries or whatever, but to have them just telling you, and to take our staff, we educate our team, we take them on tours, and we go up to Soder. Ken Wright spend a half a day with our team explaining his vineyards, how they prune, where they are, why, talking about 50 million year old soil and bedrock and things like that is eye-opening, especially for folks that grew up here. They might not even realize they're surrounded by an internationally famous draw in this wine community. And so, yeah, it's a bug. We've caught it. I built a wine cellar in my house, and these people keep sharing more and more and more, and it never stops at this point, which is fantastic.
So you mentioned obviously that this place, Park and Main, was kind of a accumulation of everything you'd done before, and you had these ideas. Tell me about some of the restaurants you built before. What goes into building a restaurant that may be not obvious to someone from the outside, and what was the process like for you?
Yeah, I think the reality of it is there's a lot of behind the scenes that people never see, and a lot of heavy lifting. Where are these grease lines going to go? Where do the grease traps go? Where do we put in ducting? Where do we put in service? How is this going to flow as a restaurant? So designing these spaces so that it's friendly to the guest, the people who are going to dine in it, but also workable for a team. Like if we have to take 10 steps to deliver this dish, we're going to kill ourselves. So let's make this space smaller. Let's make it more accessible, whether it's in the bar or it's in the kitchen. All of those things are hyper important, and that's something that people don't ever see when you're a guest in a restaurant. You see the food come out, and you see the wine or the beer or whatever, and you see the service and the chefs. But you don't see all those little nuances. Park and Main, having to take the windows off the front of your building to get your equipment in. All those things that no one has a concept of. And building them out, mainly ourselves. The Barberry was a built building. We had a contractor, we had an architect, and we had all these plans, and it was very professional. So that was a totally unique experience for me, because the first restaurant we built out ourselves. Well, I take that back. Farm to Fork, we actually renovated a building. So we took a building that had nothing in it and put 23 hotel rooms on second floor of the building. And you think about when it's an office building, there's one central bathroom, and so there's one sink, maybe 2 or 3 toilets, etc. We now put at least 23 toilets, showers, sinks, all above us. And so when these office buildings are constructed, they're not designed to hide that piping and all those things. So that was a crazy experience of how do we retrofit an office building and still make it cool in a restaurant environment downstairs or a lobby of a hotel. So that was crazy. It worked, but it was a wild experience. And then just the heavy lifting of rolling up your sleeves. And for me, I love the idea and I love the concept and the design part of it. And then there's a point where I just I don't have the focus to get to 100%. And that's where having people like my father-in-law or Paul or Philip, who are 100% so hyper focused on the detail and making it that great experience, have helped me learn how to open these places and how to build these places and how to make them fun and enjoyable for people. And again, it's always a collaboration. None of them have been the same. Next door with Ikigai, we had to jackhammer out concrete floors and put in drains and put in sinks. And the bar at Ikigai was actually a storage room, so there's no services in it. So there was one light. So it's those type of things when you're building these places that you learn a lot, and you also learn a lot that people are reservoirs of knowledge, and the more brains you can get on it, the better off the end product is going to be, because we all can't have the ideas, and you just have to be open. I've learned to be open and be like, you know what, that was a ton better idea than I had. Let's do that. So you go in with a certain thing, and then if you get the right people, they help the metamorphosis occur, and the end product becomes hopefully tenfold what you thought it would be originally. And like I say, I have lots of ideas, and they're all developed to about 60%. So, that other 40% is sometimes the most important 40%, honestly. And so, the idea is great. You built the foundation. Now let's make it really cool. And these people have helped do that. And that's the one thing, if I could encapsulate anything about building out restaurant spaces, is be open to the ideas, have the concept, know, the numbers, and this is going to work and all those things, but also be open to someone saying, well, what if we did it this way? And when I show you Ikigai, there's some fun things in there that you go, that's kind of cool. Like, wow, that was the old window on the back of the building, and this used to be wainscoting in this building, and now it's a ceiling, and all that kind of stuff is fun. There's all kinds of things in Park and Main that way that you're like, oh, wow, how did that even come to fruition? Well, this is how. And it was that collaboration.
You talked earlier about sort of some of the growth you've seen of the hospitality industry in the Willamette Valley. Tell me about, from sort of initial impressions of Willamette Valley restaurants, hotels, wine shops to now, what are the biggest changes and what do you see still needed? What comes next in the growth?
Sure. You know, that I've thought a lot about this because when I came here, I didn't think I was going to be in the restaurant business necessarily. I thought I was going to be in the hotel business. That was my background coming from Montana. We had a 150-room hotel. They were all different. They were beautiful standalone cabins. There were beautiful, well-appointed hotel rooms. They were down in the basement, bargain basement, literally budget rooms. And so I thought I was going to build hotels, and that was my intent. That's how the Inn at Red Hills was started. But I think, you know, watching the evolution, when I came back was right at the time that the Austin family was building the Allison. They just started. In fact, one of my best friends from high school was running a firm called Lease Crutcher Lewis out of Seattle, and he was the project lead on the Allison Hotel, and he was telling me all these wild things like how beautiful it was going to be and all the amenities and the 15,000 square foot spa, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And at that time we needed that because if you don't have overnight accommodations, there's only so much you can grow. There's only so much that localized, regionalized travel will support. And when you start getting world-class wines, like people want to see it from all over the world, but they need places to stay, they need things to do. So the Allison was kind of that first really big one. And I think, you know, right now you've got the Atticus coming in and doing a great job. And you've got a proposed hotel right here in Carlton that's getting a lot of, I guess, questions asked about them because it's a small town. I think the more accommodations that we have, the better the wine country will be. I think it's something that's still needed. And it's needed from many standpoints. It's needed to attract visitors and to keep them here, but it's also needed from an economic vitality standpoint that if we don't keep the visitor in our hometown, they're going to go back to Portland or they're going to go back to one of these larger cities and stay. And that's where they're going to spend their money. That's where they're going to buy a gift. That's where they may buy a bottle of wine. That's where they may buy a sweatshirt or whatever to take home to their friends or for themselves. So we need that. You know, if we want retailers to be able to survive in Carlton, they need people staying and walking out in the morning and supporting the coffee shop. So they buy a coffee. You think about if they were in a hotel in Portland, someone else, they're buying a coffee from someone else. And so that component, I think, is one of the largest components of how the wine country will evolve and grow. I have a great friend who worked with Mary Francis at the investment bank. He's on the board of trustees at Linfield now. And he asked me one day, we were having dinner, and he said, you know, I'm on this board, and the president came to me and said, well, what should we be doing? We have this amount of funds. We have all this land that Linfield owns. And I said, well, if I was Linfield, I would build a conference center and a hotel and branch off of the wine program and start a hospitality and culinary program and really feed and be the place that lifts this valley even further, because that access to education and training of people who want to be in the hospitality world doesn't exist a lot here. And so we're scrambling and searching for people, and it would feed this local economy. And then these jobs they're good jobs. They pay well. People think, oh, it's just a service industry job. I'll tell you what, I've owned a lot of restaurants, and our service people make a lot of money. The tips that they take off the tables, what we pay fair wages, and with that, I look at it and think, well, geez, Josh, you made $84,000 last year as a server working 4 days a week. That's pretty cool, right? So, and helping those people like develop savings accounts and IRAs through our companies and things like that, like that's all important, but it won't keep going that way unless we have further resources. And that overnight accommodations aspect of visitation but also the potential for a Linfield, a George Fox, to think, how do we branch out, garner more students, because their world's changing in education, and how do we attract people that's not necessarily vocational ed, but it's more focused on, hey, I want to be in hospitality, and now I can branch through this way. I can go into marketing, or I can go into production, or I can go into, culinary, or I can do all. I could figure out what it means to be an administrator, or owner, or general manager, and garner all these things. But we need people to think outside the box, and the people with the resources. I'm a bootstrapper in this business. It's like, okay, can we buy this piece of equipment next month? Yeah, we can or we can't. But the people with the real resources to invest. And I see that happening. It's happening around. It's attracting people to this community that want to invest. And I think they have good intentions. And I think they want to help these things happen. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing we could see is the overnight accommodations expanding in the communities. I think the educational and visitation aspect from, okay, it's a dentist conference, we're bringing in 200 dentists, and they're going to stay at the Linfield Hotel or whatever, and they're going to go to the conference, and then they're going to go out to these restaurants and dine on 3rd Street, or come out to Carlton and dine, or go buy things at the bookstore, or whatever. That aspect is critical, so that we can develop something here in the valley that feeds this industry. And it's wine and it's hospitality, because you can't have one without the other. I mean, the honest thing is that nobody's going to want to come and continue to visit, and it's going to stagnate if you can't offer nicer hotels, nicer restaurants, spas, golf courses. I mean, you think all these things that people create wine country vacations adjacent to. And it's sometimes not wine related, because if you're there for a week, are you going to taste wine 7 days in a row? I mean, your palate's going to be crushed. So there's got to be some days where, like, hey, okay, today you're going to the spa, we're going to play golf. Tomorrow we might do a raft trip, or we might go on a mountain bike ride on the trails. Those type of things are also elements that, if you're going to be world class as a destination, you have to have it. And I think that's the next step of the evolution of this wine country. I think we're seeing the wine industry, they're very focused, and they're very well funded, and they're making beautiful product, and they're on a path. And now we, as a hospitality group and as communities, need to figure out, how do we interact? How do we want to interact with that? And I think it'll really help these communities with influxes of capital, jobs, and an ability to think, well, I used to think that I could only do this. If I wasn't going to go on to college out of high school, I could only do these things. But now you see places like Solid Form Fabrication in McMinnville, like they're creating all these cool welding jobs, right? Well, that's happened because of the construction that's going on, and people want custom signs, and people, all those things are interrelated more than people think. And it's not just, I don't want to ruin the town or whatever. Well, I don't think it'll ruin it. I think it'll enhance it. I think the reality is that right now we have a lot of traffic that comes in and then leaves. They're not going to stop coming in. So if we were able to keep them in our communities, whether it's Lafayette or Carlton or Dundee or Dayton, if we could keep them here, they would spend more money here, and they would fortify what these towns have invested in already. But that really needs to happen, because otherwise we lose that revenue. The town loses the tax base, the town loses the jobs. Those continue to stay in a metropolitan area like Portland, and the limousines keep coming out here, or the buses or whatever, and all that money goes back to Portland. And not that that's bad for Portland, it's good for Oregon, but I'm about the local community, and I think that's really what we need, is these people who are visionary in hospitality, accommodations, spas, activities, golf, mountain biking, whatever it might be, to activate what we already have here as natural resources, but to activate it and employ people, and then somebody to help train these people so they can get an education that's great and go into the field on a localized basis, or maybe go intern in California and then come back, or go intern in New Zealand and then come back and bring the ideas that they saw in those communities to a place like Carlton. But that's the future, and that, in my mind, the heads and beds concept is very real, and will have the most impact economically, but also culturally, because it'll bring people that stay in the town versus go back somewhere else, dine somewhere else.
You mentioned earlier you have a really nice synopsis of kind of the evolution of the Oregon wine industry as you've seen it, the kind of eras you've seen. You mentioned now is kind of the proliferation period, and a lot of small as well as a lot of big. You also mentioned kind of an interest in seeking out wine and adding for lists like this. So tell me about, from your perspective, keeping up with an industry that's growing like it is. How are you finding new and exciting things, and what are you kind of expecting to come next?
Well, I think we find things in a lot of ways because people seek us out and they realize that we're open. And so you see a lot of things on our shelves that you may have never seen before. Small producers, independent producers, and we've kind of let it be known that we're a champion of that. As long as the juice is good, let's taste it and sit down and talk about what it is and how you're doing it and why you're doing it and where you're doing it, and we can help you tell that story as a winemaker. And so seeking it out when we get free moments. Hey, let's go. We heard a friend of ours who's a vineyard manager has a friend who's starting a wine label. Let's go find it. Let's go taste it. Or they brought some home and they're over for dinner. And all of that is just being open to let's listen and let's find things that are cool. I think that that is also starting to see spin-off when you see these large producers and they're hiring a lot of young people, and the young people may be trained in France, they may be trained in Davis, they may be from another region, they may be from Canada, and then they bring that knowledge here, but they also bring a connect to those regions where they might be from, which brings more people here. And I think just welcoming them and making sure that they feel like they're a part of it. Sometimes industries get driven by fear and secrets and things like that, and Oregon's never been that way. Oregon has always been welcoming. Let me show you what I'm doing. And it's that way with food, it's that way with wine, it's that way with beer. I don't think anyone's, trying to cover their test, right? They're trying to say, hey, what do you think? It's more collaborative. We want to be collaborative, and I think that's why we have the selection that we do, and we continue to seek it. Because the worst thing, I guess, is sometimes I ask some of our wholesalers, like, well, where else is this wine? If they say, well, it's all over the place. It's at Safeway and Ross, and you should have it because it's all over the place. I'm like, no. Like, people haven't come to my little shop to find something they can find at Albertsons. They've come to this shop to find something that's unique and delicious and maybe even costs less. And also, that story resonates with people. Wine attracts a lot of wealthy individuals who collect wine, who enjoy wine, who have big cellars and travel the world to taste wine. But one thing that sometimes they don't have is that story. And the story, I've found, is now the most important. Because if we can introduce somebody to Grant Coulter before he becomes Grant Coulter, right, in a certain way, that's something that their friends who also have big mansions and big wine cellars may not have, right? And that's the fun for us. And even on a localized level, like, oh, geez, I've lived here this long, and we go to the wineries all the time. I've never heard of this. Oh, yeah, you should try this. The Corollary project that's come along, brilliant sparkling wines, things like that. We seek because we want to be the place that has things you don't know about. And you discover, and it's also part of the fun, whether it's food or wine. That voyage of discovery for people gives us energy, and they go, we're doing the right thing. We're introducing people. It might be heavier lifting, and it might be harder because we're buying direct from these small producers, and so we've got thousands of invoices instead of 5, right? But that effort also keeps us honed, keeps us in the game, and keeps us wanting to find more. And so, that's how we try and build these walls of wine and build these experiences. We want to find the stuff that nobody else has. We want to access stuff that's hard to get. And someday, one of these winemakers will come back and say, well, geez, I know we used to sell you 20 cases, but now we're allocated. And hooray for that day. Hooray for that day and that person who invested so much. So.
Last question for you. You've mentioned obviously your new project next door coming along nicely and soon. Anything else on the future horizon for you? Anything you haven't done that you want to do? Anything else that you're looking forward to?
There are, I like to tell people we're 60% into a business plan as a 5-year-old business. We had lots of ideas when we started this, and COVID put some of them on the table, back-burnered, and some of them because we couldn't find the right individuals to help us grow and lift this place. As we're able to find these individuals now and this talent doing things, we have this huge back outdoor area that we intend to make more fun, more options, outdoor bars, fire pits, outdoor cooking elements, permanently covered pergola spaces and spaces for events and special parties. So we have years ahead of us actually in this footprint that we have in Carlton, and that just at the site, plus with the ice cream and the vision of a fleet of really cool old International Harvester Metro vans selling from and other at our ice cream at events and parties and farmers markets around, and really making a name for putting spirits and wine and beer and ice cream, which we do all of, is another horizon. So yeah, we don't see anything, I guess, in my lifetime that we're going to run out of space or ideas or potential with all of these things. We're now starting to cater. We didn't have the space to do that here, but we're going to start doing that now. We have space out of Ikigai to cater, and we can cater anything. Where Philip is doing a shrimp boil up at a wedding party this weekend. So it's that type of thing that excites us, keeps us active, and makes us go, well, we've got a lot of work ahead of us to keep going. So yeah, those are all on it. People always ask, well, how come you don't get into the wine business, or you don't? So I don't. I have a passion for it, but I don't know how to do that. And so I'm going to let the experts do it, and I'm going to enjoy that. That'll be my little slice of enjoyment without work, and being able to experience it and watch other people's passions be delivered will keep me out of going crazy and trying to start something else on that end. And my wife knows, he never stops thinking up ideas, and there's always a new idea around the horizon. Just when we think, we're done and it's working, there's a new idea. So we've created this here in Carlton, and now we have multiple spaces that we can really grow into, and we think that's going to deliver us to the point where maybe at some point we'll slow down and enjoy it more. But there's a lot on the horizon between the new restaurant, the new catering operation, the ice cream operation, and building out over the next couple of years the back space here at Park and Main and Ikigai, because it's actually connected. So that's going to be a fascinating project to watch, and I think we'll also deliver something that doesn't exist right now in the Valley in terms of an outdoor space that you can use in a multiplicity of ways. Like there can be a little event happening, there could be ordering from 2 different restaurant styles. So you think about the ability for people to come and define their own experience. I think we'll be able to create that space out back. So
amazing.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
All the questions that I have. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to cover?
No, I think, really it's about, for us, it's up on our wall, family, friends, and community. I've got a great family, super supportive, and sometimes they lose out on all the crazy ideas we have, and they're always supportive of it. My daughters are growing fast, and watching them grow makes me go, okay, I need to have more of these great people so that I can spend time with them and family, and go see people that I haven't connected with. And I have friends that came up through the Montana ranks that now own their own resorts in Minnesota and Arizona, and I haven't even been there. So doing those kind of things I think are on the horizon, and being able to enjoy the fruits of our labor a little bit at some point is really exciting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing the space with us. All these intoxicating aromas in here have been very hard to concentrate, but that's okay. Appreciate the time, appreciate you sharing your story, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.